Oh.
Actually, it has little swimming ladies on it with swim caps.
It's the kind of ladies I like.
Oh, I thought maybe you were like painting, and then like you and Zach started like splattering paint on each other, and then one thing led to another, and that's
like
why she was not on time.
It's like a Matthew McConaughey movie. I love me some Matthew McConaughey.
I would go gay for Matthew McConaughey.
He's my brother-in-law's neighbor.
Seriously? He makes me want to drive a Lincoln so bad.
The Lincoln Lawyer is such a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good movie.
Is it?
It really is a good movie.
I think he did his best work though in Failure to Launch.
I actually like that movie.
And it takes place in Maryland. I mean, who can't not love that?
But yeah, I mean, what was that HBO show? True Crime?
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
Fantastic.
He was good in that one that he, what was it called? The Dallas
Buyers Club?
Yeah.
Was he in Eastbound and Down?
I don't think so, because that show is so bad.
It's terrible.
It's so good.
It's awful. I hate that guy.
I hate that guy too.
He's not funny at all.
No. Kind of like Fred Armisen.
Like he just
also not funny.
I don't know who that is.
I'll agree on that.
He's the guy from Portlandia.
Oh yeah, he's not funny. Yeah. Definitely not funny.
So I feel very unprepared now.
That's how we feel every time. You'll be fine.
What am I going to say?
So you should know, Johanna, that I am promoting you as coming to annual conference in June to do our live podcast. And it's entirely okay if you can't make it. But being able to say you're going to be there makes us look like, it's a more attractive offering.
Until I can't make it, in which time I look like a horrible person.
It's fine, because the other person coming, Kendall Solon, he stood us up one year too. So it'll be perfectly fine.
So by comparison.
Actually, he stood us up one year and then canceled on us the following year. So, and with you coming, Johanna, it gives us diversity for the sake of diversity.
Yeah. We need
international and female.
Nordic. The president's a big fan of your people.
Apparently.
Sweden is not a shithole country.
But I already am going to Mockingbird. I don't know if I can do 2 Methodist events in one spring. It seems like a lot.
Mockingbird is not Methodist at all.
What is it?
It's just a parachurch organization. It's a lot of Lutherans and Episcopalians. You'll love it. Actually, you will love it. You will love it.
I know. I'm really, really looking forward to it.
It's funny. I signed up for this Luther conference in California next fall. I don't know if I told you guys about this, but when I registered, it had like what denomination I am to click, and United Methodist wasn't even an option. I had to click other.
They are foreseeing what is to come.
That's funny.
It's like Anglican, Episcopalian, even freaking Southern Baptist, but not United Methodist.
I mean, you could have checked Anglican. We are a part of the Anglican.
I'm just like none. So what are we talking about?
Infallible.
All right, let me get my book.
Are we? Shit, I thought we were talking about the image of God. Damn.
I thought we were talking about.
But Jason, you poo-pooed Imago Dei.
I know. I just couldn't remember what we settled upon. It's fine.
Oh, this is such a mess. I would have prepared differently.
I was waiting for your notes that you were supposed to send us.
It drives me nutty that I was like, okay, so Monday, and then like Jason sends two text messages in a row, right? One of them says, all right, Johanna, so can you make it Monday? I say, yes. 3 minutes later, you reply to yourself, Monday might be hard after all those interviews.
I was replying to Teer's thing about wanting to like do editing lessons afterwards.
Okay.
Wait, so what are we doing today? Imago Dei?
Okay.
Infallibility.
Infallibility? I don't want to talk about infallibility.
I think it's fine. We'll be fine.
I don't know anything about it. I'll just sit here and shut up, like always.
Yes, you do. You've been to seminary, and now you're back in seminary.
Which says I didn't learn something the first time.
You doing okay, Johanna?
Yep, I'm Googling some things. No.
Did you...
Wikipedia.
Did you have a good weekend?
Did I? Yeah. Yeah. I went out to dinner Friday night. Oh, I told you.
That's right. Yeah, you told me that. Yeah.
With my crazy future neighbor.
Allie's birthday is tomorrow. She's turning 40.
What are you getting?
Wow. What are you? Yeah. What are you getting her?
Well,
Better be good.
I was going to buy her a Peloton bike, and I was actually sitting on the toilet at the gym, like putting it in my cart and everything. And Allie literally texted me that moment and said, "I just bought a Peloton bike for my birthday."
Are they nice?
Aw.
I don't. I mean, I know they're cheaper than the Soul Cycle classes she's been taking with Brad's wife, so it'll pay for itself in 18 months. It's
nice.
not cheap though.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
But she likes to work out at home rather than go out. So.
No, we are considering buying one, and we just haven't pulled the trigger yet.
I'll let you know. It comes on Saturday.
Do they assemble it for you?
Yep.
Or do I get to look like a tough guy? And
No, they do it, I think. 'cause
Nothing
there's,
like getting here. Come here.
warranty issues and stuff like that.
Nothing like getting from your loving husband a gift that says you need to lose weight.
She
my wife suggested that I get it, so I don't know what does that say?
I'm just being a shit. I actually don't think it's like that at all. Like obviously she really wanted it.
I got her a whole bunch of lingerie too, so it's fine.
Sweet. Yeah, you can get a snack. You want to come and say hi to Jason?
And Teer.
And Teer, he doesn't know. Basically, he just got past calling you Alexander and Gabriel's dad.
Or Jason.
Jason.
We look alike. I mean.
Well, fine, Xander.
That's why I like this show. This is my favorite show, I think, that we do.
Z-Man, can you close the door?
Crackers and grape juice is our bread and butter because that's where we get our most listeners. By the way, we sold enough shirts to actually make some not only money, but they're actually printed.
Oh, very good. Johanna needs to buy one.
Yeah, you do. I'll send you the link right now.
You need a podcast T-shirt and mug, Johanna.
Maybe that's what you can get me for Christmas.
That's what you should get Allie for her birthday.
Well, you say that like I didn't get you something for Christmas.
Apparently, something's going on around here.
I just didn't mail it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
are we ready? I need to be done at 4:30. I made reservations for Allie's birthday tomorrow night, like a really nice restaurant, and she doesn't want to go.
She doesn't want to go.
You take her to Founding Farmers.
I don't like Founding Farmers. Bastille. It's a very nice, lowbrow French restaurant.
That's nice. It's very romantic.
have you
Why
been-
does she not want to go?
She's a homebody.
Yeah, but
Lots of people are. I'm learning.
yeah. I mean, I get that, but like a French dinner with your husband on your 40th birthday, I feel like you can swing that.
You take her to Cock and Bowl down in.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's called the Cock and Bowl. It's a Belgian.
That's funny.
the
That's a
Belgian
good name.
restaurant down there. But no, they have really good mussels.
Ah.
Ooh.
And Jason does, so it would be a great place for him.
One of the chapters in the book I'm working on is entitled "A Whole Lot of Cock."
Sweet.
It's from. Have you read The Chocolate War?
No, but it sounds familiar.
Robert Cormier. It's like a really dark Lord of the Flies, like children's, like young adult book from the 70s. There's a great quote in there about him, being as deceitful as Peter with 1,000 cocks crowing in his life.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's an appropriate chapter title, but it is actually
Cabinet's not going to have a problem with that at all.
See, what I want is to make it sound or look like it's an inappropriate book and have them get upset, and it's actually not.
Well, and then prove that they haven't read it. That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
I think that you have like clickbait disease the way some people have measles.
I'm good. I can come up with clever titles.
So Allison found this link. Let me tell you about this real quick, and then we can start. It's a headline help. It's through some institute, the Advanced Marketing Institute, and you type in what your headline is, and it will analyze it. And they'll tell you if it's there's 3 categories: intellectual, empathetic, and spiritual. And it rates most like New York Times headlines are in like the 50th percentile, and that's. But if you can get 20 to 25 percentile in these different categories for whatever your target audience is, it's really good. So I'm going to start using it for naming our episodes.
It sounds like a PR machine where like you can get different titles for the exact same content and try to pitch it.
Yeah. So like if we did an episode on hell, like, or heaven, is heaven for real? Like you can then mix it up and see what the
Yeah, that's the guy that Chad Bird guy I talked to today, he has this great talk that I listened to, where it's all about like counting, how we count X number of things to like establish our sense of self-worth, and how we count other things, we obsess with, like the sins that we've done and like the people we've hurt and like blah blah blah, and then he like transitions to like Jesus doesn't know how to count. Like it was really good. The only number Jesus knows is 0, I think, is how he ended. It was good.
There's a book too that I should send you called The Clouds, I think. It's by a guy named John Durham Peters, who was a professor of like rhetoric and philosophy at Iowa for a long time. And then he finally he blew up big, and now he is at Yale, I think. He did like a faculty seminar at Pitt a couple of years ago, and he was super crazy smart and cool. And he would talk about like make these big transitions from like inscription and tabulation being the original purpose to make marks on things. Like, you owe me 2 chickens because I helped you fix your roof. And like, in order to remember that, like inscription being like the is or is not kind of state. And which I was like, oh my God, this is so cool.
So we should talk, Teer and I were talking before, we should talk about how we set up some sort of like homiletics coaching that you do through us.
Yeah, I think so too.
For listeners.
Wait, what? I do it through you? So basically I give you guys my expertise and then you try to like pawn it off as your own?
No, like we promote you through the podcast, but like the people we're trying to attract are the people who would listen.
I have thought this was like a good idea for like a couple of years, that we do like a homiletics workshop weekend.
I just don't even know, like, what does that look like? How much do you
if she's coming here in June for annual conference, we do it the day before annual conference starts.
Yeah, like you bring you workshop and
did someone just die?
Because most pastors could use continuing education money from the conference to do it.
Or we could just maybe talk to the conference and see if they'll just fund it for the day.
Yeah, I mean, the format itself would not be difficult. I feel like I could set that kind of like how to stagger it up pretty easily. Like the beginning of an idea, like brainstorming its relevance, like taking, a quick session to like who else do you want to bring into the conversation, like structuring it, like that part would be not that difficult.
Just if you need a guinea pig to test it out on, you could just,
Yeah, that would be super fun too.
All right.
I've never heard anyone talk about bad preaching as super fun.
No, I mean, like the fun would be like making it good or like talking to people about their ideas, which is
helping
like always
preaching from the pew. Boom. Look at that. Some sort of title like that. That works.
Preaching from the pew. Right now,
the tagline could be like that woman in the third row who's always looking at you disapprovingly. Imagine if she were your preaching coach.
Be vindicated by your victim.
I like that. Vindicated by your victim.
All right, so let's start.
All right, begin, Johanna.
Okay. All right, so the term that we are doing today is infallible, because we are now starting the letter I in our series on hermeneutics, rhetoric, and theology. And we've actually survived all the way through I wasn't sure that we were going to do that.
We're still friends too.
Actually, we never posted the other I's.
Yeah.
Or that be.
Did you find that, Teer?
I haven't. And you know what? If people go to Patreon and they become subscribers and support us over on Patreon, I'd be happy to post it there.
We will send a secret little episode to Reynolds Shook.
Secret episodes.
So infallible, Johanna.
Yeah. Or you said infallible/inerrant, which I think basically means the same thing, depending on what Latin word you're going with.
Okay.
No, we need to be very specific because this happened to us in our last attempt at this, where we
That's true. Good point.
Unbeliever and non-believer, and we rambled for 40 minutes and couldn't make an episode out of it.
Okay. Infallible. There's one of those quotes that everybody thinks is from the Bible, but is actually Alexander Pope, which is, to err is human, right? To forgive, divine. So how close is that to being true from a Christian perspective? Or is being human defined by being, in fact, fallible?
Have you ever noticed that no one ever says when they've done a good thing, well, I'm only human?
No, I've not. No, not only have I not noticed that, but I can't imagine that making any sense.
Well, I thought it was a funny comment. Never mind.
We should go back to the part where we talk about animal husbandry. What are the purposes of goats?
So so like in the Christian world, infallible normally refers to how we revere and or receive Scripture, and it is easily confused with the word inerrant. And in some circles of the Protestant world, it is one of the fundamentals, along with, the physical resurrection, the historical truth of the virgin birth, the substitutionary atonement on the cross.
Male preachers, things like that.
Male preachers, but it's one of the non-negotiables of the faith.
For
Christians. For fundamentalists, it's one of the fundamentals.
So infallible, though, that's a descriptive word. So what is it as applied to Christ?
As applied to Scripture.
Oh, okay. So like Scripture is inerrant, like there's no flaws in it.
Yeah,
that takes us back to when we talked about biblicism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So biblicism and inerrancy are yeah.
Okay. But what I wanted to talk about was the sort of infallibility of Christ.
Well, you can take it there then.
Yeah, let's do that. So, like I said, if being fallible is, if to err is human, can you be incarnated as a divine being and still be infallible?
Yes. No, it could be, so
this would be a lot easier if you don't pretend not to understand my questions.
No, I just wasn't expecting you to take it and apply it to Jesus. So it's to err is human in the sense that all humans are sinners.
Yes.
But to err is not to be human as God originally intended humans. And so if Jesus is one without sin, fully human, but without sin, then Jesus is the only true human, which is to say he's infallible.
Okay. What
and Scripture then as a witness to him infallibly points to him, but is not.
Threaded that needle so well.
So that's a big point, right? Christ is fully human yet free of sin, because humans are sinful by definition then. But that in that same breath, we need to say that we are not human as God intended originally humans to be. So is this us finding ourselves in the sort of Garden of Eden situation of like, oh, we were planned to be one way, but now we ate the apple and so on? I know nowhere, it doesn't say it's an apple anywhere, but is that what we're talking about? So God had a plan for humans to be perfect, and that got messed up.
I don't know if perfect, but I mean, the creative intent was for humans to be creatures, and to be a creature of God is to trust God, the Creator, and we don't do that. And so that's the sin. But I know people have, they want to push back and say that, the story of the fall is projected upon the story in Genesis, and that's fine. Because I think Karl Barth has a good point when he says, if you're going to locate original sin anywhere, it's in the Passion story. But
what does that mean?
That we need no other proof that we are mired in a state of original sin than the fact that when God takes flesh, we push him out of the world on the cross.
if we were intended as creatures of God to be infallible originally, and then but then when there's a contrast between original intention and then what ended up happening, and that we are mired in sin and thus pushed him off the earth, it's very difficult, I think, almost like grammatically or like in the language, not to make this seem like an oops, like this was an intention originally, but then that didn't happen. How is that commensurate with like the ubiquitous, omnipotent God, other than just like pulling the free will lever?
Well, so first I would step back and say that, you know, there's a difference between making mistakes and sinning. And so, you know, even apart from the fall, we would have been creatures who err.
Yeah.
You know, in the same way that, I mean, you know, my dog doesn't learn that if he puts his paw on the stove, it burns him. Like, he keeps doing that. Actually, we took our dog to doggy daycare for the first time on Friday to have him evaluated. And so, like, there's like this cinder block wall in the big dog room. It's about 4 feet high, and then it's glass. And so we're looking in, and every 5 seconds he jumps 4 feet off the air and thrusts his head into the glass trying to get it. And he did that over and over again for 20 minutes. And so, yeah, but he's not a sinner. And so,
but okay, really, I mean,
but
so he's not. Oh, okay.
But to answer your other question, I think it's necessary for the logic you just kind of unspooled, that, you know, when we say the Son is pre-existent before creation, that, you know, within God's knowledge and identity prior to creation is the assumption of the cross. That there's really no way to avoid that conclusion.
Why is it implied?
Well, I mean, I think it's implied for the fact that, well, you can't, you know, like, it can't be that at some point God changes his mind and thinks that we are such that we need, you know, rescue.
Yeah.
The cross. That this is.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I really kind of want to talk about that, because I feel like that's something that gets buried in a lot of the ways that people interact with their churches. Like, I think that that's something that would be really helpful for pastors or clergy to help their congregations understand. Like, it's not that God had a plan, he made the earth, people hung out and were bad to each other, and God is like, gosh, dang it. Like, I got to send, like, now I got to, like, fix it.
Damn it.
Yeah. In case of emergencies, take flesh.
Right. Exactly. But it would have helped to have that unpacked for me when I was probably like 14.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it, like, what's surprising, like, I mean, Calvin even wrote about that you can't have God changing his mind or disposition towards us.
So infallible means having all time, all space, all things in one synchronous entity.
And you can't have an eternal Son who is somehow fundamentally different than the crucified Christ. That the character of the crucified Christ is pre-existent in the Son. And so Robert Jensen, who just died, who's been on our podcast, he did a lot of work talking about how, you know, it's Christ came to die. The Christmas carols are true. That is
right.
That his, the cross is implied in his pre-existence, or is just necessary for any sort of kind of logical understanding of God.
But so God, the triune God, creates creatures, including humans. Humans err. Sometimes because we're shitheads. Sometimes because we are silly and ignorant. So we are redeemed in the sort of incarnation of the infallible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the word, like I mean, we mentioned Calvin. So, like, Calvin gets labeled as being kind of obsessed with depravity, human depravity,
Mhm.
But when you remember that Calvin was French, then you know that the word depravé just means warped, like a board or a mirror that gives off kind of a wobbly reflection. And so there's even for Calvin, our inherent goodness as creatures is still there.
Like warped, like not depraved, like just lecherous, but depraved, like warped, like distortion is the same turn of phrase, right? That like warp and distortion have the same etymology of like turned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the language Augustine uses, that sin is just us turned in on ourselves. So it's not this bleak Cormac McCarthy view of humanity necessarily.
I mean, I feel like there's a place in this that we sort of have to do the work of going to, which is that, like, can you be human and be perfect? Not okay without going back to this, like, well, God created creatures and they were intended to be like I don't want us to go in a circle, but isn't part of the experience of living here in flesh containers, isn't it to experience that which makes us air?
Teer, weigh in on perfection.
Yeah, or put another way, is infallible the same as perfect?
It's one of your future ordination vows.
Infallible is not the same as, well, okay, which angle are we talking about perfection, though? Are we talking Christ's perfection or us moving on towards Christian perfection as followers of Christ who are sinners and fallible? Because I think that's, at least for me, when I think of perfection, is that's something that me, myself, and other followers are working towards, using Christ as our example, knowing that we will stumble, trip, fall, whatever verb we want to use there, along the way, and that it's by grace that the grace of God, that we will learn enough about Christ and the role Christ has not only played in our lives, but in the saints before us, that will be able to live the life that that we will be able to live the life that Christ made possible for us. If that makes any sense, and I'm sorry. May God have mercy on your soul.
No, I think the connection to grace is good, because I think the proper understanding of grace is that it frees us from the burden of needing to be infallible.
Right, and that's one of the
and accept, like, there's this counterintuitiveness, I think, to the gospel and grace, that being freed from the need to become perfect or be infallible actually sets us on a trajectory towards that.
I think that's one of the problems with our Wesleyan theology, for those of us in the Methodist tradition, that on one hand we have that we have grace on one hand, and we preach grace, and grace is abundant and available to us, to all of us. But then on the same hand, we should be, at least as clergy, when you are asked this at your ordination exam, like, yes, I am going on to Christian perfection, but don't worry, I have grace to back me up. Like, it seems that we are preaching two different things, or we want one group of people to understand that we have grace abundantly available to us, regardless of who we are or what we've ever done. But on the other hand, I need this group of people to do this one thing and go on this path while everybody else is on this path.
I think
but it'd be great if you work toward perfection.
Right? It'd be great if you could do that. But maybe it is that we should all, not just clergy, be working our way to Christian perfection and trying to live an infallible life. But it's that we also have grace available to us to, I don't want to say catch us when we fall, because that sounds like a bad song. But when we do screw up, or
if you fall, I will catch you. I will be waiting.
Time after time.
So,
who sings that? Is that Belinda Carlisle too?
No, I think that's been covered by several people. So there was a visiting preacher yesterday in my church, and she told a story about I think either a movie or a book, and it helped me understand something that from a perspective I hadn't really thought of before about infallibility, or like about culpability, I guess. And it was a priest who had been accused or convicted of some sort of like improprieties, like sexual improprieties. And then that went on for a while, whatever. And then the priest took another clergy member hostage in some way, or extorted him, and said, he got a death threat. That's what it was. The good guy, the good clergy, and the bad guy who had been convicted said, I'm gonna kill you in 5 days unless you renounce your vocation. Like, don't be, resign from your position, or I'm going to execute you in some really graphic way. And the point was that this clergy, the good guy, had been he'd been master pastor and really, really appreciated by his congregation in every way.
Master pastor.
Okay, the takeaway point was it's going to make a big impact when I sacrifice you, who is like the good guy, before the audience of this community. And I've been trying for a long time really hard to understand, like, what is the substitution logic involved in dying for all of humankind? And I think it's a really, really difficult concept to accept. And most clergy kind of pitch it like, yep, it's pretty straightforward. Like, Christ died for you, the end, Merry Christmas. Like, I just don't, I feel like, or either way, it's all the time because it's a big deal. But that doesn't mean it's easy to understand. Even if you say it like, yeah, no big deal, it's easy to understand, that doesn't mean it's easy to understand.
Mm-hmm.
If it was easy to understand, we wouldn't need places like seminary. Like, we wouldn't have places dedicated to the study and education of not only people who are called to preach and proclaim, but then we wouldn't have institutions of higher education where people go to study this and study what has happened before and studying to uncover new revelation.
Well, I think the mistake. So it's hard to articulate, possibly, or understand, but I do think on a gut, visceral level, it communicates. The for you-ness of Christ dying in your place. That it preaches, like, people. It's.
I don't think you're wrong, but
like,
I
that's
think
the power of, like, Les Mis, and like the priest vouching for Jean Valjean's life, like that. And it's a power that draws out of people, in like the willingness to,
no, it's awe-inspiring.
I don't like the word inspiring, but
yeah, I guess not. Like, I'm not crazy about it, but I
Well,
don't think you're wrong, Jason.
Together, yeah.
that it's an evocative thing, not.
Yeah, but evocative is not really enough. Like, lots of things are evocative, but I mean, I think that you're not wrong, in my opinion. That it's powerful. Like, here you are in the middle of all kinds of suffering, and you get told the good news that Christ died for you so that you may be restored to God. That's pretty great. Like that. Yes. But for people like me who are then going to be like, what do you mean for me? Like, say more about that. I feel like it's very important to have that conversation on and on.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I do think it's you can't assume the message, and you have to articulate it in different ways every Sunday through word and sacrament. And I think, and you can't do it in abstraction from all the other motifs about the cross in the New Testament. Like, that you have to hold all of them together. And I think too often we want to say, we want to privilege substitution, or we want to, in progressive circles, we want to privilege kind of, Christ, the moral exemplar, embodying perfect love on the cross that calls love out of us. In any of these, like substitution is the primary motif, but you need all those other ones to complement it. And you definitely need the idea,
because substitution, I'm sorry I interrupted, but the substitution so strongly implies a counterpole to the divine that it's really, I think, difficult to convey. Because since I was in confirmation class, I've been wondering, to whom? So sacrificed his only son to what? So who is the recipient of the sacrifice? If a robber has my son held hostage, I'm obviously going to say, take me instead. Do whatever to me, let him go.
Well, now you're mixing your motifs.
No, then let me be the substitute.
Mm-hmm. No, so the language of substitution requires us to use the language of sin and wrath in a way that makes a lot of modern Christians uncomfortable. But it in the Son, the Father gives himself as a substitute for us to himself.
And that's because we are so far removed from sacrificial culture that anybody today who's making sacrifices, physical sacrifices of killing, whether it's an animal or another human being, they're considered completely outside the norms of what it means to be part of our global civilization. So maybe that's part of the difficulty.
And to get back to the word, I think we tend to think, we're not infallible, but we're not really that bad. Certainly not bad enough to require someone dying for us. We've lost that awareness of the human condition.
And that's because we look at it from an individual standpoint. I personally am not that bad. And you could argue that I'm not, that God, but when you take my sin and add it to your sin, Jason, and then yours, Johanna, and then everybody who lives in Texas, right? It starts to snowball a little bit. And then if we throw in, people from Norway and other bad places around the world, right? It starts to build up a little bit.
Well, that, and I think that you can make that, there's the tally motif of it, yours plus mine plus hers plus that guy.
It's like shopping at Costco. We've got so much sin. But
you can also, I feel like the part of asking for the confession of sins during the sermons or during the services, when you're in that posture, I also feel like it's not just the addition of sins, but it's the because I am here and I'm kneeling before God, and there are also other humans in the world, and I am in a kind of, I'm responsible to them and for them, right? There's this I am exposed to them. And so in a really powerful way, their sin is my sin. So when I think that when you're trying to grow as a Christian, forgive that cliche, everyone, you're you also stop feeling like the forgiveness of sins part is you mentally and quietly listing the crappy things you've done since last week. It's not oh, and I'm sorry, I snapped at my spouse last.
But in all of that, Wednesday. It's not even, it doesn't, and maybe that's part of the problem of the way we view sin, is it's not just this itemized list. It's that list as a whole is how that we have turned away from God. And maybe that would help us reclaim the individual nature of our own fallibility when we think that our stuff isn't as bad as everybody else's, so it's not that big of a deal. But in whatever that little thing is, we have turned away from God. And there's no
and I'm always
parse that.
And I'm always suspicious of the people who say, right after you finish a movie about Nazi collaborators and whatnot, and everybody's like, oh, I wouldn't be that guy. I'd definitely be the guy who was helping the resistance. I'm like, would you though? I feel very fearful of the possibility that I would be the person reporting on my neighbors, because it just doesn't feel like I'm that much better than the people who did that.
I think, but it's important that, like the Romans 5 line that you mentioned, Johanna, that Christ died for us while we were yet sinners, that what precedes that is Paul insisting that there is no distinction between any of us, that we're all unrighteous. That's, I think, chapter 3, and then chapter 2, he has, this, relentless portrait of how everyone is compromised before God. That it's,
yeah.
And it's funny that many of us recite that line at least once a month in our churches, regardless of our tradition. And we just kind of gloss over that. We don't know where it comes from.
And then that's, so it's, we just had Epiphany. And so, like the text on a lot of Sundays of the year at this time of the year is Jesus being baptized, and that, the reason Jesus says that he's being baptized by John is to fulfill all righteousness, right? And like the idea there is that apart from him doing that, we have no basis on which to approach God. So
I was giggling because the other reading is the reading of Simon being called, which is just like everybody's favorite story. Here I am. Oh, it wasn't you again, a third time. Eli's like, go back to bed. And then we sing that like during the communion, we sing like, here I am, Lord.
I hate that song.
I hate that song too, because I want it to be like,
I'm the Lord of
right. Yeah. Everyone should be singing. And then I heard your voice and prayed that it was not really happening. Like, please don't call me. I don't know what to do.
Or I rationalize why I shouldn't heed it.
Well, it's that God is calling each of us, but in our own way, regardless of what it's like. We intentionally choose not to listen. Whether that's through rationalizing or the way that we deem we need to order our lives or whatever it is. But we intentionally choose not to listen. Yeah.
The line that goes like, I will go, Lord, if you lead me, I will hold your people in my heart.
God is leading you right now. It's not God leads you. It's happening.
It's like one of 3 songs we sing at like every clergy meeting in college.
Really?
Golly gee.
And like Holy Spirit fall afresh on me. Like, oh, that's they're all terrible songs. But anyway, so are we, Infallible? Bring us home, Joanna.
All right. Well, I think that the question that we haven't resolved among, all of the other questions that we haven't resolved is like, can you really, can you be fully human and not know what it feels like to act on your impulses to do bad things? But when?
But I think that you're assuming that what it means for Jesus to be fully human is to be able to identify with our feelings.
Yeah, because if we bracket what you were saying before about what we were originally created to be as humans, then I don't know what we're left with.
I just don't know that the New Testament is very interested in Jesus identifying with our feelings.
No, that's a strong point, but isn't part of being human to act like all the other humans there ever have been. Like there must be a substantive grounding for the fact that we all act really similarly despite time and culture.
You were supposed to bring this home.
And not be like, what is the core of essentialism, guys? Like, praise be to God, I guess, is the only way to bring it home. The being restored by him who is perfect, as his Father in heaven is perfect.
I mean, one way to answer it, we're not home yet. We're in the driveway.
Oh, you trampled on my bicycle wheel right in the driveway.
Jason's about to walk us to the door.
But one way of reading the Gospels is that like when Jesus shows up, they're like, oh, now? Like, why did you come now? Because there was this expectation among Jews of Jesus's day that if they could live out all of the commandments of the law, then the Messiah would come. Mm-hmm. And so the incarnation preempts their ability to do that. You know, and so like, you know, like Jesus is like
The law isn't a set of principles that if you enact them all, you will be perfect. Like perfection is something that you can only be given when you are restored by grace.
Yeah, the incarnation is an interruption in their attempt to be infallible in following the law. And so, you know, like that, and so like more so than identifying with our feelings, Jesus comes to live that out infallibly.
Okay. That's fine. I don't think we really sorted that out, but I think that's fine.
Well, I thought we were going to talk about like the Bible and how
We did that already. We did that episode. We just called it biblicism.
But
I
if
don't
people,
even remember that one.
if folks think that we haven't fleshed this out enough or figured it out enough, they could always go over to the Facebook discussion group and talk about it there.
Yes, if 33 minutes was not enough to solve this entire.
I'm just joking. It's lovely to see you guys.
Yes, always. Thank you for being such a good part of my life.
Shout out to our listeners. And we just got a donation from Reynolds Shook. So Reynolds, if you're listening, gracias. Actually, she's from Alabama, so Spanish is probably not a good idea. Thank you.
So probably won't be able to hear this podcast now because you've used
Okay.
Good.
Out. Done.
The shirts are, hey, the last order of shirts that people did are now printing.